This is Wendy Warren, the Vice President of Communications for the Louisiana Restaurant Association, and I'm here with LRA President and CEO Stan Harris, and we're going to talk to you about the NRA Public Affairs Conference, April the 25th through the 27th in Washington, D.C. Hi, Stan.
Hi, Wendy.
So what's the purpose of the NRA Public Affairs Conference?
Well, these events for a lot of industries, they call them their fly-in day, and it gets our members out of their business to go in and really tell their stories front line to either our elected officials and in some cases their staff, just depending on what the demand is. Louisiana, we're very fortunate that we've got 6 members of Congress and 2 senators, as every other state does. So being able to get to see every one of them is something that we can typically do over a day or a day and a half. But with the COVID restrictions that are still in place, it's going to make it a little bit more challenging. So the folks that are going this year, we're giving them a little more prep and getting them to understand that you might not be able to see everyone that you'd hope to see, but the message is really important. There are an array of things that we need to accomplish on behalf of our industry, and this is the kind of opportunity where we can have people listen to us one-on-one.
So on day one is really a learning day where you go in as an attendee, you hear from some great speakers like...
Well, we're going to have John Boehner, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Senator Joe Manchin, who's been in the news a great deal, is really kind of being the 51st vote with the Republican caucus when there have been some of those things that might have been damaging to our industry, like the $15 minimum wage and the elimination of tip credit, that he was staunch opposition for that in the beginning. We've got Anna Palmer, who's coming in from Punchbowl News. It's one of the news sources that I use every morning that really has a great granular approach, and it's free for what's going on in Washington, D.C. They have a little bit more detailed one that you can subscribe to. And then on Wednesday morning, before we do our hill climb, Congressman Steve Scalise is going to come and speak to our group for about 15 or 20 minutes and kind of give him his view of the money that they're raising and where they think the fall elections are going to go.
Oh, that's certainly on the top of some of our folks' mind for sure.
Yeah, everyone's looking at the election and they look at it that it might be a mandate with the president's approval rating falling. Quinnipiac had a survey last week that 2 months in a row, his approval rating was about 33%. That makes it awfully tough to get your agenda done because, you know, in some of the things that they've been proposing, one of the simple things is trying to get a $15 billion COVID bill done. This would extend the therapeutics, this would extend the testing, this would extend the vaccines to be able to carry them through the balance of this fiscal year. And they can't get that done. So not being able to get that done, that makes it somewhat of a challenge for the White House to decide what their policies are going to be. Because not only do you have moderate Democrats who might be up for re-election, and the entire Congress will be up. All 435 members of the House will be up for election. So you've got some progressive in there. If you get people that are elected that are more progressive, I think it's going to make it a real challenge for the White House to put together any successful legislation in the following 2 years.
So what kind of issues are we going to be discussing with our congressional delegates next when we get to Washington for public affairs? They seem to all be workforce related.
Yeah, they really are. There's a couple of things that are important to us. The first one, and we got some good news in the LRA last week, and I started hearing it from some of our members at our first GNO chapter meeting, that they started to see some of their ERTC payments come in.
Oh, thank goodness.
And that's those employee retention tax credits that we were able to use in 2020 and the first 3 quarters of 2021 to be able to offset some of our employment costs and be able to get this tax credit. One of the folks at the dinner last Thursday night mentioned that they had gotten as high as $650,000 in ERTC they were on.
That's incredible.
And they've finally gotten about $300,000 of it in the last 30 days. So we're starting to see that flow a little bit, but that's what we're going to push on. And not only that, we really feel like that when they passed the most recent stimulus bill, one of the things that they were able to do in their infrastructure bill is they pulled back the fourth quarter of the ERTC. And we had people who'd already planned on it, they'd already budgeted. And when we explained to them that that had happened, they really cried foul. So trying to get that done, there's several pieces of legislation, both on the House and the Senate side, that would reinstall that and allow you to be able to capture that for the fourth quarter of 2021. That would be very helpful to some of our operators. The other matter is protecting the tip credit, and this is an education thing. I did a podcast with one of our folks, Elevate Louisiana, a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that they brought up was talking about tip credit and tipped wage. And when you look at it in the realm of simply that's the hourly wage that you're getting from your employer, they forget to mention sometimes that they have to guarantee the difference between the minimum wage. I'm very well versed in talking about this, but at the same time, I'm not aware of anybody who's having to make up that payment. When you look at total compensation, when you look at what they're making for those particular hours, let's say on a 30-hour a week basis, they're making $25 to $30 an hour. That's very significant. And it shouldn't matter the source of it, because it's the effort of the employer to create the business, to take the risk on the business, to create the menu, to take the risk on paying the staff and all the other things that have created the opportunity to be able to make that money. Right. And quite frankly, it's something that the United States has done for a long, long time, is that that's, the service charge is more of a European and international model than it is a U.S. model. And I think that we've got a lot of folks that are tipped service workers that would be very disappointed if they lost the opportunity to do that, because once that flips over, as we've seen in some of the states that and municipalities and operators that have decided to switch to a service charge, we've definitely seen that tipping basically disappears.
Right, and that, you were a restaurateur for many years, and you have some amazing stories about how well some of these servers did. That is,
what's how you apply yourself. It's I was talking to Chef John Foltz on Friday, and I reminded him of something that he had said a long time ago, that his goal with one of the groups he worked with, the American Culinary Federation, was to try to take a job and create it as a profession. And that's why that ACF was created. It's why we want to generate competency standards for jobs, and we want to be able to help people have a long and successful career in the food service, the restaurant, the hospitality business, no matter what sector of that you're in. But if you're an on-premise food service worker, if you're a server, if you're a bartender, if you're a captain, there are organizations that like ours that can provide additional training and career development for you so that you'll understand the pathway. I was tempted by an article not only in the Advocate this weekend, but also in Eater that they picked up about the new maitre d', the day lunch maitre d' at Commander's Palace, and how she had started years ago as a food runner and then became a front waiter and then a back waiter and then a captain, and all those positions. People don't do those jobs over a long period of time unless they enjoy the work they're doing, unless they enjoy who they're working with and feel valued. And then the third part is, what can I make for doing this? So all of those three things kind of go together. And when we artificially, I want to remind people about this too. When we talk about tipping and things, and if you've never worked in the industry, you just don't understand it. I've gone on radio shows and had people call in and want to argue about it. And I'm like, you don't understand it. You don't have to do it. You're not forced to work in this industry. We'd love to have you, but it's not going to change anytime soon. The other part with this that I think is really important is when you're in the full service side of this, I can tell you story after story for people that make six-figure incomes waiting tables, being a wine captain, being a banquet captain, and doing this kind of work, and they enjoy it. They like the flexibility of it. They like the responsibility or the lack of responsibility outside of work hours. They like the ability to be able to look and pick and choose those shifts that help them fit it to their lifestyle. Right. So all of those things are really, really important. And it's something that I think our industry is going to continue to engage on. And it's easy to remind people that 43 states still have tip credit. Right. They would like you to believe, the people who oppose this, they would like you to believe that the majority of states have eliminated, and that's just not the case.
Louisiana hotels know a thing or two about hospitality, from the thread count of the sheets, to the little scented soaps in the bath, to the praline on the pillow. For the Louisiana Restaurant Association's SIF, the same is true when it comes to workers' comp. Our team knows what Louisiana hotels need when it comes to your team's safety and your success. Everybody who's anybody goes with LRA Workers' Comp. Ask around. In this business, word of mouth is everything.
So the third issue on the agenda for Public Affairs Conference is the
Essential Workers for Economic Advancement Act. In Congress, everything has a name. There was a Restaurant Revitalization Fund Replenishment Act that was called the Entree Act. So everyone wants to come up with something
their
snappy.
little acronym.
Yeah, there's a bill that I was asked about last week that is a aquaculture bill that's called the Aqua Act, AQUAA. So everyone wants to have some kind of wonderful title tied to it. But what the Essential Workers does basically is, with food service and restaurants and hospitality being the second largest private sector employer, what we're trying to do is create an opportunity using and expanding what has traditionally been the H-2A and H-2B visas and creating a new category for H-2C. There'll be a certain number of those that will be allocated just to restaurants and the rest over the food service industry. So what we want to try to do is we want to show them about the job prospects. We want to talk about the career trajectory, a path to really having a family-sustaining wage and building accessible careers. And that's what this program's going to really do. And I think it would be very, very interesting. We think that under this program, there'll initially be 65,000 workers, but that'll be determined really on the market. And the number of workers in the program can't exceed 85,000. It's a long way to go. We've got bipartisan co-sponsors on this. We have a lot of people in the resort business and large hotels, and a lot of the hotels and restaurants here in New Orleans have relied on J-1 visas to be able to find their workforce seasonally. This is going to take us out of competition for headcount with people like the seafood processors or the agriculture people that use workers in a more seasonal approach. So it could be very, very helpful to us, not just in Louisiana, but everywhere that there's demand from tourism and leisure travel.
So I'm going to ask you about something that has been very difficult for some of our folks to wrap their minds around, and that is the RRF replenishment, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. We've had a few stabs at replenishment, and the most recent one was in the House. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And
yeah, when that bill came up, it was driven predominantly by Earl Blumenauer, a Democrat from Oregon. It had initially, in the initial structure of the bill, about 25 or 26 Republican co-sponsors. Unfortunately, the way that they are running the House and the Senate today, they don't run in a regular order. So bills aren't heard in a committee in many cases. The chairman doesn't get a markup. There's another chance for transparency. And basically, the bill comes to the floor for a vote up or down. And, in some of the bills that are multiple thousands of pages, there's no chance that you can vacuum all that into your brain and absorb it for that period of time. So it's somewhat of a challenge. This bill was no different. It was supposed to be focused on getting about $40+ billion in for RRF for the people who didn't get it. The speaker, over the last 48 to 96 hours before the bill was voted upon, added $15 billion in expenditures that had nothing to do with restaurant revitalization. We see that every time they try to do one of these spending measures. And slowly but surely, you started to see the Republicans fall off the bill as co-sponsors. I think there were only 6 Republicans that actually voted for it. And so it was predominantly a party line vote. You can say it was bipartisan, I guess, if one person's there, but it's one person from the other party's there. But it's really it wasn't a really bipartisan vote. And it's dead on arrival when it comes to the Senate. It's got things in it that'll never be heard. Schumer is not going to bring another vote up unless he knows he has 60 votes. Week before last, he brought a candidate up for the head the wage and hour division of the U.S. Department of Labor, who had previously had the job under the Obama administration, and he thought he had the votes, and he got smoked. And he was really surprised, but more than that, he was embarrassed because this should have been a slam dunk for them. They shouldn't have brought someone up for having an appointment confirmed if they didn't have the votes. So I think he's going to be very cautious about that going forward. There is a bill on the Senate side that's predominantly Republican co-sponsors, and I don't see it moving anytime soon. What I do think that there's a possibility of is if there's a COVID spending bill, we might be able to put some relief on it. This is an issue of fairness. We have restaurants that the people on either side of them got money and funding from RRF, and the guy in the middle didn't. I don't think we're going to get the $42+ billion. I think that we're going to probably have to settle on something more like 20%, 25, 30%. It's not fair. It's not equitable, but it's the reality of what we have in politics. The other part is that when Bill Clinton got shellacked in his first midterm election, he pivoted more to the center, and they did a lot of things that were really helpful. One of them was welfare reform. I don't see this president moving there because I think even if you have a large Republican caucus, you're going to have to hold all those votes together to get anything done. And they're not going to raise taxes. Right. They're not going to cut defense spending. They're not going to embrace social projects and climate change to the limit that the far left wants to do. So I think it's going to be a very dull couple of years. I think the Republicans have also made the comment that should one of the Supreme Court justices die in the last year or so, they're not going to hear, just like they did under the last administration when Obama was there and Antonin Scalia had died. So I think you're going to see more separation. I don't think you're going to find a real solution for RRF. There may be some money put toward it that they find. But the big part in all these spending bills is the Republicans are demanding that they put pay-fors in there. Right. What that means is they want to see where the money's already been appropriated that they can reallocate to this. That program is either expiring or the money they originally put in it, let's say $100 billion, they didn't spend but $20 billion. That 100's still appropriated, and it doesn't have to go through the entire appropriations process. So these are things that I think that.
And that was one of the things that when we met with Senator Kennedy, he was very adamant about how is it going to be paid for. He kept referring to these buckets of money that have already been allocated and haven't been spent and those kind of things. And I think that was really telling about that where the Republicans are on that side, on that issue.
Well,
and he was the treasurer.
They feel like so many trillions of dollars have been spent, $6-some-odd trillion that add directly to the deficit. So it's a question of what have those monies done? Right. We haven't had enough time in some areas for them to see how the money has fully been deployed.
Right.
RRF was an area that we saw was really good and deployed. We didn't know it was coming when it was part of the American Rescue Plan. Yes, had we talked about it, it was really an 11th hour conversation from the leadership in the White House saying, we're going to put this amount of money in there. Our team started saying to them, $28.6 billion is a great start, but it's not going to take care of all the need. The need is somewhere around $70 billion. Well, guess what? That's about what it would take to fully fund that. I just don't see that there's any feeling for doing additional deficit spending right now. It boggles my mind that we can have something that was administered as patently unfair as that was. Right. Because I think if you look back on this and you looked at the entire pool of people and you say that's $70 billion and you took the $28 billion and you said, well, basically we're going to get a third. so everybody's going to get a third of what they asked for. I think that would have been a more
Right.
equitable way to do this.
Yeah.
And I think people would have to look at it now and say, well, I can live with that because at least I got
Something.
some taste of this.
Yeah, exactly.
But the way it went, it was poorly done, and it's unfair.
Yeah.
And, I've talked about it till I'm blue in the face with our congressional delegation and
With
both
our
our senators,
members.
and we're going to continue to talk about it because I still think it's something that we can't just sweep under the rug
Right.
and say that it didn't happen. It did, and it was handled badly. And I understand that with our congressional delegation, we only have one Democrat, and our folks probably all but one or two of them voted for the American Rescue Plan. I get it. I understand it. But at the same time, it didn't happen under the last administration. What did we get from the last administration? We got 2 tranches of payroll protection.
Yeah.
Those were very, very helpful to us at that particular time. But again, looking back, it was probably 20 weeks of financial support for what turned into be a 2-year calamity plus.
Lord. So yeah, these are just a sampling of the things that we'll talk about in Washington, and you'll hear people on all sides having their opinion and weighing in at probably the breakfast or the dinner.
Well,
and then we'll have to corral them into their little here's the sheet, because when they get into the meetings with our congressional members, I mean, we're looking at like 20 minutes.
20 minutes tops.
Yeah.
You know,
you
and
have to be
typically
really
you're going
focused.
around the room introducing the folks as where they're from and what their business is. And then we have a very brief issue conversation with a couple of handouts, and we try to answer any quick questions, and then we've got to move on. And the one thing I explained to folks is that you're going to get a friendly greeting in your home state's members of Congress or senators' offices. But you may be there advocating for something, and the people that have the meeting right after you are advocating for something 180 degrees from the other side.
Right.
And you just have to understand that, because that's their job. Their job is to try to balance all of those priorities. We do not move. We have not moved in 10 or 12 years in regular order in either the House or the Senate. They do it occasionally. But I think when you go back to the Affordable Care Act back in 2010, that would have been a different story if they did it in regular order and really debated the sections of the bill. We would also know what was in it before they passed it. We would also know the surprise things that are in it, like extra taxes when you sell a house. And those things have nothing to do with health care, but it's how they paid for the bill.
Right. And also, we've experienced that when we were when these COVID relief packages were passing in 9 days, and then everybody was scrambling to read what had actually passed. And then we spent the next couple of months like untangling the knots, the
and you'd see
unintended
all the things that were
consequences.
being funded that had zero to do with COVID relief, money for the Kennedy Center in D.C. I'm sure it's a very
worthy cause
and a beautiful performing arts place, but I don't think it had anything to do with COVID relief.
Well, next week, April the 25th through the 27th, you're going to have about 24 of your LRA peers, or you, if you're listening. This is what you can expect. These are the issues, and Stan will be there. Danielle will be there, making sure that you guys have a good, informative, enjoyable experience in our nation's capital. So until we meet again, this is Wendy, VP of Communications for the LRA, and Stan Harris signing off.